my second son, Levi, we got pregnant. It took, again, about 6 months for us to get pregnant with him. We started trying whenever Jonah, my first son, was about a year old. So he was about a year and a half when we got pregnant with Levi. And that pregnancy went real smooth. There was no issues at all, which was great. Like, we didn't have to have any extra ultrasounds. And at that time, I really wanted to try to have a VBAC, which is basically trying to have like a vaginal birth after a cesarean. And my doctor had told me like that should be fine. There shouldn't be any reason why I couldn't do that, because it was all circumstantial with Jonah. Like, I just had low fluid levels. The second time around didn't mean I was gonna have low fluid levels. I could have normal fluid levels. And so the plan was to just wait until I went into labor on my own. If we needed to induce, we would. Just kind of go from there. There was always the risk that I might have to have another C-section if something happened. So I knew that, and I was totally fine with that. But if I had the option to, get to try to have a vaginal birth, I wanted to do that. With Levi, I went over with him. I was 40 weeks in 2 days. 39 weeks, 40 weeks. I was just kind of doing whatever I could. I was like ready for him to come. I was tired of being pregnant. And I was 40 weeks in 2 days, and that night, I went to bed late that night, and I believe it was around like 1 o'clock before I went to bed. And then I woke up at like 3. I don't remember if I woke up to pain or if I just woke up because I needed to go to the bathroom, but I do remember waking up at 3, and I think I did start feeling pain at that point, like crampiness, and I didn't know what it was. I thought like maybe it was just my body kind of prepping. I didn't know if it was like the real deal, but I was like, okay, is this it? Because the whole time I've been like, is this it? Is this it? So whenever that happened, I was like, okay. So I got up and I went and sat on the couch, and I had my phone with my app for timing your contractions. And I just sat there for a while and waited. At first they were like every 15, 20 minutes. And then they started to get to be every 10 minutes and then like 8 minutes. And then it got to the point where they were about every 6 to 8 minutes. But like the contraction itself was like a minute long, almost every time, like 45 seconds to like a minute long, which I felt like was a decent amount of time. And it started to get to the point where I was definitely having to focus on my breathing and breathing through the contractions. Like, it was pretty painful. So I went back to bed at this point and told my husband, I think I'm having contractions. This might be it. And so he kind of laid there, and whenever I laid down, they got more intense, and I would squeeze his hand every time I would start to, feel a contraction coming on. And it didn't take long for them to get real strong, and it wasn't much time later that I decided to call my mom to come over. She was going to stay with my son Jonah. I kind of went back and forth whether or not I should call her yet. Is it time? I don't know. I didn't want to make her come over and then go to the hospital and get sent home, because I had never got to experience contractions coming on and all that stuff. So I had no idea really what I was looking for and how much pain was I supposed to be in. Is this enough pain? It definitely was painful. I couldn't walk during a contraction. I had to stop what I was doing. I couldn't speak. So I knew they were pretty intense, but I just didn't want to get to the hospital and be turned away. But it did get to the point where I was like, okay, let's go, because I'm hurting. So my mom came over. This was probably around 6. So in 3-hour period, things pretty much started going pretty quick. So she came over real quick, and we left for the hospital, which luckily was a 10-minute drive or less. We got there really quick, and they put you in a triage room when you first get there to look at you and check you out, make sure that you're actually in labor. So I noticed whenever I changed into the gown, I went to the bathroom and a lot of liquid had come out, and I didn't really know what that was, if it was my water, because it wasn't a ton, but it was enough for me to notice. And I went and laid back down. I was still having regular contractions at that point, and when they checked me, the lady was like, yeah, you're at a 4. And I was really surprised by that. I did not expect to already be at a 4, but I was excited because I was like, okay, this is it. This is happening. I'm not being dramatic. I'm really in labor. And whenever she moved her hand, my water broke, and it broke big time. I'm that girl that flooded the whole bed. Everything was wet. It was gross. I feel bad for my husband, but he kind of did it, so it's his fault. So anyway, everything was wet. Like I had to help him, like he had to help me change out of the gown. Like the whole, like the little liner they put on the bed was like, oh, it was gone. It was like disintegrated by all the liquid. And I was just like, okay, this is birth. Okay, this is fun. And so we changed and they got me into a room and they were like, do you want to get an epidural? And I was like, yes, please, like as soon as you can, 'cause this is not fun. The guy actually came back pretty quickly. I didn't have to like sit there for too long with the contractions. So he came back in and gave me my epidural, which the nice thing about that was my husband was able to, you know, be right there with me. He didn't have to leave or anything. The epidural was a little bit more painful than I thought it would be from having like a spinal and epidural. Like I just kind of expected it to feel like the same thing, or, you know, I've heard a lot of women say that because their contractions were so strong that the epidural wasn't bad at all. And it really, like the stick wasn't, it felt like a bee sting again, but then it was like, I guess the medicine going in, I could feel that, like it was like a burning sensation in my back, but it wasn't like anything unbearable. And so once that was in, I lay back down and I was like, I sat there for a little bit and I noticed that I was only numb on like my right side. And I had mentioned that to them because she was like, are you good and numb? And I was like, well, I can still feel my contractions on this side and like in my lower back and everything. And so they just kind of had me roll over and the medicine just kind of like trickles over to that side, I guess. And I was good and numb after that. So that was great. And everything was good at that point. I called my family and I talked to my mom, I talked to my son, I told everybody, you know, what was going on. We were having a baby and yeah, everything was good. So the doctor had come back in, or one of the nurses had come back in soon after all that, just to like change the mats that they put like little pads underneath you because you have stuff coming out. She went to just change that, and whenever she did, she noticed that there was like something that looked like baby poop on the pad. So she was like a little bit concerned. She said that she thought maybe the baby had flipped and was now butt down. And so she wanted to have the doctor come in and check me and make sure that he was still head down. So the doctor came in and checked and she was like, yeah, he's definitely still head down. That's the head. She was like, you're also at a 5 now. So everything was good. She like took her hand out. And when she did that, I had a bunch of liquid that just came out. And they didn't seem alarmed by that. I just was like, oh wow, you know. But as soon as that happened, I did notice that the heart rate monitor thing that monitors the baby's heart rate started to like make a beeping sound. And so they had told me that his heart rate had dropped some. So they wanted me to roll to my side and like we tried different positions to try to get his heart rate back up. But the longer that the time went on that his heart rate was not coming up, the more doctors started to come into the room. Eventually they had me get on all fours. And this wasn't a long period of time. This was like a matter of 6 minutes where all this was happening. So finally they're like, we need you on all fours, which was difficult because I had already had the epidural at that point. So I was numb and I could not move my lower half. So I had to have some doctors help me over onto all fours. And I stayed in that position for a little bit. It felt like a lot longer than it was. Like I said, the whole thing was like 6 minutes. But they were telling me like, if we can't get his heart rate up, you know, we're gonna have to get you in there to get a C-section. And I was like, yeah, you know, do whatever you have to do. Like, I just need him to be safe. And so that's what we ended up having to do. It was a very, very quick thing. Like it's a blur to me, even trying to remember back to everything that happened because it was so fast from them checking me to them rolling me out. Like I was still on all fours when they rolled me out. I think I like glanced up at my husband who was sitting there. I didn't even like have time to say anything to him or him say anything to me. It was so fast. And all I can remember thinking was just like, I just need my baby safe here safely, you know, like I don't care about me. I don't care about anything else. Just get him out and get him here safely. So I'm sure I was a sight because I was on all fours and my gown is just like open in the back and they're like rolling me out into, you know, to go back into like a surgical room. And so they get me in the room and it's very quick. They have me rolled over onto a table real fast. They have the anesthesiologist come in and start cranking me up to get more of the epidural inside of me. and they can't spend a lot of time waiting for him to make sure that I'm good and like doped up with the medicine before they can start cutting to get him out. They had started to cut, and then they were like, "Can you feel that?" And I said, "Yeah." You know, I can still kind of feel that, like it's not completely numb. But they were like, "We have to get him out. Like there's not anything else. You know, I'm sorry. Like we're gonna try to give you more. You know, but we have to get you out, get him out." And so they just had to keep going, which I knew that, and I wanted them to do that. I wanted them to keep, you know, do whatever they had to do and get him out. But I do remember at one point kind of yelling, like, "I can feel that." Like I kept saying, "I can feel that, I can feel that." And then at one point I was like, "I can feel that." Like I was kind of screaming it because I could feel it. It was like you know, it felt like a burning sensation, like, you know, and that's all I can describe it as. It was like a burning, like if you have your flesh burning, that's what it felt like. And it wasn't like, I couldn't feel it like 100% obviously, but it definitely was not completely numbed. And so I did feel that, and that's not normal. I know that's not normal because I never felt anything with my first son, Jonah. All I felt was like tugging, but there was never any like pain. Definitely felt, and that was kind of scary. I did get to a point where it was like, I could really feel it, and I was just like, you know, in your head, you're like, how much worse is this gonna get? Like how much? But luckily they were able to get him out really fast. Like within a matter of minutes they had him out, which I was really thankful for. So I didn't have to sit there and feel that for a long period of time, because I did feel like I was going to pass out at one point if I had to endure that for much longer. So they got him out, and I was relieved. And then they had the NICU team already in there. They got him out. He never cried, so that kind of concerned me. I was like, is he okay? Is he okay? They wouldn't respond to me immediately, and I just kept asking it over and over again. And finally they were like, you know, I had a nurse come over. They just kept saying, "They're taking care of him. They're taking care of him." Because I couldn't see anything. I couldn't hear anything. He wasn't crying. I didn't know what was going on. The only thing they had told me once they got him out was that he was really long. They were surprised at how long he was. And they seemed happy. They were like, "Oh, you know, he's so cute," and all this stuff. And they gave him to the NICU team who was in there. I could not see them or see what was going on. I did have a nurse by me because Stephen was not able to come in there with me at all, my husband. So I was by myself during all this, and I had a really awesome nurse who was right by my side the whole time, holding my hand. It was actually a guy nurse, and he was like so nice. He just held my hand the entire time and was just trying to comfort me, and like I really appreciated that. They did a great job at like trying to make you calm and make the situation more calm than what it was. Eventually someone from the NICU team came over and talked to me, but they wanted to wait and tell me everything before like my husband got in there. They brought Stephen in eventually, and it was very quick. They told us that they had to intubate him because he was not breathing on his own very well. Like his heart rate was still down whenever they got him out. It never went back up like immediately, so they had to help him breathe. They did that, and they just told us that they were going to take him to the NICU, and that's all I knew. I did not know anything else at that point. I told Stephen, my husband, I said, go with him. So I really only saw him for like a few minutes, and then he was out leaving with Levi. So I laid there for what felt like forever for them to stitch me up. It took them a while, a little bit longer than normal, I think, to stitch me up because they had to get him out so fast. There was more pulling and more ripping and stuff than normal. So it did take a little bit, and I had a previous C-section, so there was more like scar tissue and stuff. So it took a while, and I'm sure it didn't take as long as I felt like it took, because I felt like I was laying there forever. But finally they were able, to wheel me out and into the recovery room. Whenever I got in there, my parents were able to, they were like, I don't even remember if they were already in there or if they came in there soon after. I think they came in soon after. My nurse was great. She felt like family to me. She was just so sweet and so kind. And you know, even though I didn't have like Steven with me or anybody with me there that little bit after, she was just very sweet. And she kept apologizing because she's just, I don't know, I guess she took it to heart that, you know, she had them check me and all that happened. But I kept telling her it was going to happen anyways. Like, they were going to have to check me at some point. The fluid would have came out, and then the same thing would have happened. Like, and she just said, you know, none of us expected that or saw that coming. And, you know, I just kept telling her it was fine. Like, you know, it's not her fault. And then soon after, my parents came in, and my father-in-law and mother-in-law came. It was a little bit before Steven came in there because he was with Levi. And that was hard. That waiting period in the recovery room, I didn't know anything. I did not know what was going on. Your mind starts to like race and go to like worst case scenario. What if something happens? And, you know, I was trying not to let my head go there, but it's really hard when you don't know what's going on and no one's really told you anything. So it wasn't until my husband got back in the room, in the recovery room, that he told me what was going to happen. So because of his heart rate being down for the amount of time that it was, they were concerned about his brain and development and stuff like that. So they put him on, I don't even know what it's called, but it was basically like a cooling mat where it will cool his body temperature down to cooler than it normally is, to help with his brain activity. And it like basically slows your brain activity down, so it, you know, it's not really going, because they were worried about potential brain damage that could happen with, you know, lack of oxygen for such a period of time. So him being on this mat was supposed to help prevent, you know, they told us like they couldn't change anything that had already happened if there was damage that had happened, but it could prevent further damage from happening, because it almost like just puts like a pause on the brain, so like it chills the brain out. You know, Steven was like, yeah, you know, do whatever you need to do or whatever you think's best. Him being on this mat, he was in the NICU on this cooling mat, and he was gonna have to stay on that for 72 hours. He could not be picked up or moved from this mat for 72 hours. So that's what he came in and told me. You know, we could go see him, but we were not going to get to hold him for 72 hours. And so that was really hard, because that's all I wanted, was to just like hold him. But I also knew like I want to do what's best for him and what's going to help him in the long run. I don't want to risk anything. So that was the plan. We eventually got moved into like a normal room, where after you have the baby, that's where they, you know, bring you to. We stayed there for about 3 days, and we were able to, you know, go in and whenever I wanted to, I could go into the NICU and see him and, you know, just like hold his little hand. One of the hardest parts about it was because he was on like a cooling mat, he didn't have anything on, like it was just like his diaper, and they put like these little mitts on his hands, and his hands would just shake like this, and because he was cold. At first they thought maybe he was having like seizures, or they weren't sure, and so they ended up running a bunch of tests because his little hands would just shake like this, and they thought, you know, it could be because he's cold, but it could also be something else. So they ended up doing like an MRI on him to make sure like there was no like severe brain damage. I think they did like an EKG or something like that to monitor his brain waves and make sure he wasn't having seizures. And they monitored that for 24 hours, and that was normal. Like there was no activity on that. And then the big thing was the MRI. We were waiting for the results of that, because that would kind of determine whether, like, how soon we were going to be able to leave. Because even after being on the mat, he might have to stay there longer, depending on what his MRI looked like with his, you know, brain scan. But we got that back, and everything looked fine. So that was a huge relief. I had to leave the hospital without getting to hold him. We left on like a Saturday morning, and it wasn't going to be until that night that I would be able to hold him. So that was really tough, like expecting to leave the hospital with your new baby and not getting to do that, having to leave empty-handed. It felt very wrong, and that was a very hard car ride. Like, it was hard for me to leave. I just wanted to stay there. Like, part of me wanted to go home to see my son Jonah. Like, I missed him terribly. But then part of me just felt wrong leaving Levi there. So that was hard. But I knew that I could go back later that night and hopefully get to hold him. And so that's what we did that night. We got to go back, and I actually got to, he was still like, had lots of cords and stuff on him, but I was able to hold him for the first time, which was so awesome. He was in the NICU for about 10 days. So even after he got off the mat, they wanted to monitor him. He had the MRI and all these things. So it took some time. And that was hard. Like being home while they're in the NICU, you know, it's like I was happy to be with my son Jonah, and I knew that he needed me too. And it's like you feel like you're getting pulled in two different directions, because I just wanted to spend all my time up there with Levi, but I also knew that, you know, my 2-year-old needs me as well. So that was difficult. I had moments during that 10 days where I just like, I broke down. I was so emotional because I just wanted my baby. Like I just felt like a part of me was missing. And I was thankfully able to pump. I never ended up breastfeeding. They told me I could, but at that point, everything that I've been through, I just decided to pump and do it that way. It would be easier for him to go that route, to be able to, you know, give, because that's what they were gonna have to do anyways, because I couldn't be there all the time. They were gonna have to just give him a bottle. And it took time to give him a bottle. He had like a line where they were giving him fluids and giving him like the nourishment he needed before they were able to take him off of that and give him a bottle. And then I was able, luckily my milk came in real quick with Levi, and I was able to pump and give him that. So that was good. I felt like I was still, you know, doing something for him, you know, even if I was really, you know, if I was far away, like I was contributing. But then around day 10, we were told, you know, everything's looking good. I think you guys are gonna be able to take him home. He has had to go back every so often, every few months. Like he went back at like 2 months and then 4 months to the children's hospital to get monitored. They want to just keep an eye on him and his development, because that was one thing they told me, that like he could have some delayed development, or you know, some developmental issues. We just would not know until the bigger he got, you know, and just seeing how things played out. He's now almost 18 months and he's doing great. He's not walking yet, but he is crawling everywhere, and he's pulling up and cruising around furniture. So, and he's just very happy. He's a happy little boy. So we're very thankful for him. So that's kind of the story of my births. There was a lot of things that I was not expecting, and I think that's just how birth goes. Like I think there's a way that we all think that birth's supposed to go based on movies or, you know, whatever shows that we've watched, or even sometimes people, you know, other people's stories have went, you know, beautifully, and that's great, but that's not everybody's story, and it's going to be different for everybody. And I never had a birth plan. I know some people do, and I think that's great, but I never did. I just wanted to have a healthy baby. That was the goal, and whatever that looked like, that's how I wanted to do it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
It's kind of strange because with Jonah, I wasn't in their family yet, but with Levi, I was. And so I just remember all of these things from the outside.
Yeah.
Like when your parents went to the hospital, I was watching Jonah.
Yes.
And so it's just like, I mean, I've heard the story before, but it's just so interesting now hearing it again after giving birth myself.
Yeah.
Like it's just so different. Absolutely.
A totally different.
Yeah. Thing. And you, like, I remember crying so much for you, but now like having Jensen, it is even more like heart-wrenching. Yeah. Like when you listen to it.
Yeah, because you've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you feel a different type of love than ever before.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, and this is just the beginning of many birth stories, so thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.